Welcome to Aviation This Week on Channels Television, your home for happenings in the aviation sector. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi. The domestic airline sector in Nigeria, no doubt, is going through troubled times as airline capacity is now depleted with the suspension of 2 airlines, and the scarcity of foreign exchange is another big issue. On the program today, our focus is how government should rally around the domestic industry, as the issue of liquidity is also a big factor in airline operations. Plus, Nigeria offsets 50% of its foreign airline blocked funds. Our background report is next. The global aviation industry is a world in itself, encompassing a massive workforce and contributing a significant percentage to the global economy. The sector was set for major growth, challenges notwithstanding, but the pandemic hit, and this plummeted it to a considerable extent. Yet, it is fair to state that despite the economic impact of COVID-19 on the airline industry, it has been on the road to recovery. But here in Nigeria, skyrocketing aviation fuel prices, the scarcity of foreign exchange, and the temporary exit of 2 carriers is causing distress.
I mean, the industry is in crisis, no doubt. If you consider the fact that 3 years ago, you could buy fuel for 118 naira per liter, and we're talking 1,000 naira today. Exchange rate at the time was 150 naira to the dollar. Today we're talking 700 naira. So it's a huge leap in terms of, how far down we've gone. More airlines will not survive. That's the reality. And for as many airlines that are going to be out of a market, there will be a shortage of capacity. With a shortage of capacity, there will be a huge demand supply curve issue.
This flight display board at the MMA2 in Lagos shows the declining number of flights and the long delays being experienced. The consistent rising prices and shortage of Jet A1 appears to be driving airline operators to the brink as they make an appearance at the Minister of Aviation's office in the capital, Abuja.
We will approach government through NNPC and Duke Oil to ensure that that is sustained and that is made available. And the users of Jet A1, civil aviation and civil aviation only. So we would approach and try to get that done. And the foreign exchange, of course, you know where it sits. It's at the central bank and, of course, the Ministry for Planning, Finance and Budget and National Planning, and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Primarily, those are the sources. In the past, they had helped, but because of the significance and the importance of the sector, we would approach and ensure that we are able to get this foreign exchange at the official rate. That will help significantly the sector.
While the Minister of Aviation may have stepped into the situation, experts say local carriers must step out of the box.
How can we generate revenue out of the traditional seat selling? Use what you have to increase your bottom line. Once you have an airline, you become visible. Richard Branson became visible, more visible, when Virgin Atlantic came on board. So that's one thing airline does for you. And you have to understand, it's a highly technical industry, very, very expensive, and it's an industry that you must be adaptable to changes. You must spend a lot of money on research and development.
The loss of jobs in the sector is also creeping up.
As we speak today, no worker is remaining in Aero, especially as concerning the membership of our unions. We had engagements with the Aero management severally before this self-suspension. And this self-suspension, I believe, is a strategy. It's a strategy, yes, to avoid the hammer, the regulator's hammer.
We're in business, but the point is, where is the money to pay? The airlines are struggling. So, and we know. So it's a tough one. We're struggling. We are realistic with our staffs. Of course, we have not defaulted, but in aircraft maintenance, we try to keep a particular percentage of our staff as our permanent staff. The rest are all on ad hoc. So we fly them in, or we call them from Port Harcourt, Abuja, Kano, only when there's an aircraft on ground. So when they come in, if there's a C check for 4 weeks, we pay them for 4 weeks, they finish the check and they go back. Then we keep the post holders and the permanent staff as required by the NCAA regulation to keep the aircraft maintenance organization afloat and also healthy in terms of safety.
The local airline industry is not in this alone. Foreign carriers are feeling the heat as ticket fares soar.
The reality bites in your pocket, so it pinches right there, and you don't need anybody to tell you that this is biting hard, on your finances. You just have to adjust. The aviation sector does not operate in isolation of these realities. The aviation sector, for one, is a sector that is hugely dependent on foreign exchange. So most of their consumables, their services are denominated in dollars. And what that means is that with the astronomical rise in dollar or the decline in the naira, the implication of that for their business is that a lot of them will have to reduce the number of their flights or rather they will have to increase the cost of their tickets. And what that means for the traveler is that they would also want to reduce the number of times they travel. What that will also mean for the airlines is that they will reduce the number of their flights because they have fewer passengers. That also has implications for revenue because these airlines bring revenue into the country.
This latest crisis marks a further blow to a domestic airline sector still recovering from the effects of COVID-19 restrictions. Airline passengers pay their fares in naira, which has weakened sharply due to devaluations. Despite being Africa's largest oil producer, Nigeria imports almost all of its jet A1 fuel. On our interview segment, an aviation expert, Dr. Anthony Kila, is our guest. He believes that finances are key to driving safety initiatives, and he suggests a bank of aviation will not be a bad idea. There's more from him.
The dreaded question is who is next, but the trajectory is scary when we look at it because of the reasons that led to those ones. Aviation operators, even analysts, and especially regulators like to say and repeat that what matters in aviation is safety, safety, and safety. Yes, it is true, because it's quite a scary thing to fly. But here's the point we tend to miss. Before safety, there is finance. I argue that actually the core of aviation is finance. If you've ever tried to apply for a license before, you see the importance of finance. The reason why Aero is closing is finance. The reason why Dana is being accused of poor liquidity is finance. Aviation needs a lot of money, and it's not just any money, it's peculiar money, it's forex. So we have a situation where what is required of the world is expansion. What is required of the country is a quantum leap towards expansion. We need to open markets. We need to accelerate communication and intercommunication. We need to reduce space. And we have a situation where we have dwindling operations, less flight, high cost. That is chaos. That is crisis, and it's an emergency. For us to come out of this situation, I think we need to change our approach. Is that we really need to sit up and start to rethink and reset our aviation manners, the way we conceive aviation. There's a general misconception out there in the general public that aviation is for the elite, for the privileged, for the very few. And sadly, this mindset is reflected in the mind of some of policymakers. I think those who can need to change that mindset. We need to review aviation not as something restricted to the elite or the privileged anymore, but rather as a basic, essential infrastructure of a modern society. That is what aviation is in general, if you look at the trajectory of the world. In Nigeria, in a specific case, given the size and structure of the country, aviation is crucial. There is, at the moment, a tendency for regulators in the aviation sector to be seen and felt only when they ground or when they suspend. That is wrong. We need to redefine the essence of regulators as people who want the services to be provided. The regulators of essential services do not suspend, do not ground, do not terminate. They might have to do it. And of course, when regulators ground or suspend, they make a case that can be summed up as better grounding than risk. In common sense, and in general terms, you cannot argue with that. Of course, you could reply that the road to hell is paved with good intention, but that would be a banter of weight. Let us not look at it that way. Let us look at it that aviation goes beyond common sense. It's a very technical, complex thing that requires vision, endurance, and detailed knowledge of the sector.
This letter from the Airline Operators of Nigeria to the Minister of Aviation is the subject at the center of this meeting. A meeting that attracts the Director General of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, other aviation agency heads, airline operators and ground handling companies. When the helmsman of the NCAA kicks off, it's in an angry tone. He accuses the airline operators of painting the agencies black despite their huge debts.
It is unfortunate AON has backed on a deliberate, disingenuous and misleading campaign of falsehood within and outside the industry. It is pertinent to note that as of July 31st, 2022, AO members have collected over 19 billion naira and over $7.6 million in TSC and CSC, which they have deliberately failed to remit the authority.
The regulator says it's ready to wield the big stick over any airline that does not stick to a repayment plan.
Any airline that has an outstanding debt from the TSC, CSC, or the charter cargo size must enter an MOU with the NCAA for payment of this over a period of time, or their ATL and AOC will not be renewed. Any airline that defaults 3 times in a row in compliance with this MOU, their AOC automatically becomes suspended with immediate effect.
The airlines will not take this lying low. A member is displeased over the manner in which the NCAA has handled the matter.
The way you wanted to address us in this issue of this letter, to be honest, I do not agree with it. For me personally, we're one family. You need us as much as you need, we need you. If today we don't operate, none of you people will fly.
No sooner tempers flare.
That is what I told you. That is what I told you. Please, listen. No, you have spoken. Let me speak. You are the DG. You have spoken. You must allow me to speak. You must allow me to speak.
With this direction, another member apologizes.
The industry framework was. So we apologize. The AON understands, and I think you are angry. And I do not wish that you continue speaking in anger. I want to.
And the meeting moves into a closed-door session. In the midst of the chaos that the aviation industry is facing, which includes the rising cost of aviation fuel, aircraft capacity crunch, and scarcity of foreign exchange, many stakeholders believe all parties in the industry must work together like never before if the sector will survive these hard times.
It's been 9 long years since you waited for a chance to go into space, and now Nico Apunaman is set. And if all goes according to plan, that wait will end on October the 3rd, when the Native American astronaut will lead NASA's Crew 5 mission to the International Space Station. while John Harrington was the first Native American astronaut to make it to the space in 2002, Man will be the first woman to break that barrier.
To be honest, I think I feel very proud. It's important that we celebrate our diversity and really communicate that specifically to the younger generation. Because I know there's kids out there that live, perhaps in a community where there are barriers. And I want them to know that these barriers are being broken down or can be broken down. And so hopefully they feel inspired or empowered to pursue their dreams and work towards breaking down some of those barriers. In the same breath, operationally here at NASA, it's really great to be able to say it really doesn't matter, right? Our astronauts are trained across the board, qualified for missions. And so we're really getting to a point in our kind of evolution as a society that operationally we don't highlight or distinguish based on gender or race or religion. We distinguish based on your ability to execute the job. I think that's also great to highlight as part of how far we've come.
Man is a member of the Welaki of the Round Valley Indian tribes in Northern California says that our upcoming mission has sparked excitement in our community.
0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Spot and Doug.
I still live in Northern California area where the Round Valley tribes are located. And there's been, what's really neat is a lot of interest from these news outlets and from these sources from the Native American outlets. And that's really, I think, an audience that we don't get an opportunity to reach out to very often. And so I think this is just a good opportunity to highlight everything that we're doing in space and maybe, spread that word to a community that normally wouldn't be in the forefront of their minds.
With a journey into space just weeks away, Man, a Marine colonel with a master's in mechanical engineering, was recruited into NASA in 2013 and finished candidate training 2 years later. As a former fighter pilot who flew combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, she seems well suited to the stress and unpredictability of a manned space mission. Man, NASA astronaut Josh Kasada, Japan's Koichi Wakata, and Russian cosmonaut Anna Kikina are set to launch from Florida's Kennedy Space Center aboard the Dragon spacecraft and swap out Crew 4 from ISS. NASA's gigantic space launch system, atop which will be for now a manned Orion crew capsule, is poised to take a key step toward returning humans to the moon after a half-century hiatus.
Just make sure that you keep the track on your left side down. All right.
Qantas Airways Limited has said it would buy back up to $276 million of shares after the lifting of COVID curbs spurred a strong rebound in travel demand, boosting its second-half performance and lowering debt levels.
Our debt is now below our target range. It's the best it's been for 10 years. So in addition to the investments we're making in customers and our people, we're now in a position to start repaying our shareholders. And I'm pleased to say that the board, in line with our financial framework, has approved a shareholder return of up to $400 million in the form of a non-market share buyback.
The airline also recorded losses. The bulk of the losses were reported in the first half when domestic and international borders were closed under strict measures to contain the COVID-19 pandemic.
The group had an underlying loss before tax of almost $1.9 billion and a statutory loss before tax of just under $1.2 billion. That brings the total losses since the start of the pandemic to more than $7 billion and takes lost revenue to more than $25 billion. To put that in perspective, on a statutory basis, Qantas has seen COVID cost us more money in the past 3 years than we made in the 5 years before that. including some record years of profitability.
While demand has improved, Qantas in recent months has been trimming its domestic capacity from earlier forecasts due to widespread staff shortages at airports, high rates of crew illness in winter, and elevated fuel prices.
And we're also having to recruit because of high attrition. So people, when we called people back that we didn't make redundant, what we found is a large people had gone on and found other jobs. That's fair, because people weren't going to sit around and just wait for the aviation industry to come back. So we had to recruit for those people that had made other decisions. And what we're seeing now in the very hot labour market, in certain areas there's high level of attrition. Like cabin crew that we have in Western Australia, in network aviation, there's 25% attrition at the moment because they are leaving to other higher paid jobs in Western Australia, and we're having to recruit to place them.
Qantas also plans to run a competition between aircraft manufacturers to replace its aging fleet of 28 Airbus A330 planes in the next 12 to 18 months.
Cabin crew working for IAG's low-cost airline Iberia Express have gone on strike from August the 28th, the first of a 10-day strike calling for better working conditions. Spanish Union USO said at Madrid's airport that the crew members' wages have been frozen since 2015.
We expect sitting with us to negotiate and to hear us the update of the salaries, and with this start a new negotiation with the salaries of today.
The company said it cancelled 8 flights not protected by the minimum service regulations and offered alternatives in advance to the more of 1,000 affected passengers. The affected flights were 4 return flights from Madrid to Gran Canaria, Palma de Mallorca, Santiago de Compostela, and Sevilla.
It's the moment. We have been 8 months trying to negotiate with them, and it's the moment. Yes, it's the moment. We think it's true. It's a really big part for the customers. It's a really impact, but we think it's the moment to the company here to us.
Union said they have been negotiating for 8 months and workers will go on strike until September the 6th in yet another labor dispute arising from the industry's turbulent post-COVID-19 recovery with a higher cost of living, in turn prompting trade unions to demand higher wages, often backed by strike calls.
And that's all we have for you on the program, but we'll leave you with this quote. To most people, the sky is the limit. To those who love aviation, the sky is home. I'm Bukola Joe Ketumbi. See you next week.